Ladies, I think this is going to be a fun conversation. So, welcome back to Stand for Ag with Missouri Farmers Care. I am Ashley McCarty, the Executive Director of Missouri Farmers Care, and I will be leading a fun, lighthearted conversation about one of Missouri agricultural powerhouses. We have two guest hosts today who share a love for Missouri agriculture and an enthusiasm for all things that are Missouri agricultural products. A familiar face and voice from last week's Holiday Feast podcast about hams in the state of Missouri is Heather Fletcher. Good evening, Heather.
Hi, Ashley. Thanks for having me here.
And Macy Hurst, Manager of Strategic Solutions and Communications with Missouri Cattlemen's Association, is the first-time guest on the Stand for Ag podcast. Welcome, Macy.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes. And our guest today has already brought a lot to our conversation, and we are looking forward to visiting with her and learning more. So Annette Alden serves as the Marketing Director with the Missouri Wine and Grape Board. So a little bit of background. I first served for Peter Hofer, who is now the chairman of the Missouri Wine and Grape Board, fresh out of college. He was the director of agriculture at that time. And so he gave me an early introduction and a jolt of enthusiasm for Missouri's wine and grape industry. Then it was still growing and continues to rapidly grow today. So we can't wait to hear from you, Annette, kind of what the Missouri wine scene looks like. Tell us about the economic impact and the importance of agriculture in this great area of value-added impact that we are really starting to build a strong brand for here in the state.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me, Ashley. It's a pleasure to be here and to share some of our fabulous Missouri wine with you ladies. So today our team is really excited. We promote 128 wineries across the state of Missouri, and our industry supports about 28,000 jobs, and which generates about $3.2 billion of economic impact for the state each and every year. And our industry is, one that's really unique in that it brings together two of Missouri's top industries, being agriculture and tourism. And unlike some of the other segments of agriculture, it really allows people to explore and enjoy the commodity right next to the acres that produce it.
Yes, there are so many great opportunities for people to travel into rural Missouri and across the state and see and experience our wineries in action. So though a long-established industry, there are so many opportunities popping up around the state that we're excited to get to share a little bit of that enthusiasm today as we launch our Holiday Feast Missouri Wines Edition. So thank you. So we often see Missouri, we see a lot of wine, not only across the countryside, but in our grocery stores. So tell us a little bit about the differences between the varietals we may see in the grocery store and those we see across Missouri agriculture and Missouri wine industry.
Absolutely. So the grapes you're seeing on some of those other wines from other regions are called vinifera. And typically those European grape varieties like Chardonnay and Merlot and Pinot Noir, those thrive in Mediterranean climates with mild winters. And the European settlers that came to this region, they brought those grapes with them, but they quickly learned that they just weren't suited for our climate. Basically, they just can't hack it in the Midwest like we can. But those settlers did find native grapes growing, and we still actually use some of those native grapes in our vineyards today, like Concord and Catawba and Norton. And Norton's rather special to us because it is our Missouri state grape. But researchers actually learned to cross grapes to make hybrids, much like you would see with other commodities like corn. And these crosses are much better suited to our harsh winters and humid summers. And we call those French American hybrids. And since they were designed specifically for our region, they really thrive here. And some of those examples are Vidal Blanc, Chardonnay, Chambourcin, and Vignol.
I am always excited when I head into a grocery store or outlet and get to see the Missouri wines that I'm so familiar with. So what are those most popular varietals that we produce in Missouri agriculture?
Yeah, great question. We actually have some of those with us today. So the first one, and hopefully you guys have those with you, is a variety called Vignol. Now this is the most popular white grape in the state. Today I'm pouring for you guys, or you guys are able to enjoy as well, the dry Vignol from St. James Winery in St. James, Missouri. So I'm just going to pour a little bit. And this wine is really a crowd pleaser. Everyone really enjoys it whenever I bring it to events. And it's one of the French American hybrids that I mentioned earlier. And you can find it at most wineries across the state. It's really versatile. Winemakers can kind of make it their own. They can create a lot of different styles of wine with this. Anything from dry Vignol to a sweet to a semi-sweet, or even a late harvest dessert wine. I thought it might be fun to kind of go through a proper wine tasting with you ladies if you're up for it.
Yes, absolutely. So before I start, Annette, I have 3 wine glasses that were in my cabinet.
Yeah.
I would love to pour my Vignol, but I'm not really sure which of these glasses is the most appropriate to put my wine in. So
great question. You know, we get asked that quite a lot. You know, do I need a special glass for each wine? And the answer is kind of, it depends. If you're really just starting to explore wine, I recommend just get a nice set of stemmed glassware. Riedel makes some great ones. You do want to hold a white wine, you know, by the stem so it doesn't warp the wine. Now, what's special, and actually the glass that I'm using, we had some varietal specific glassware made by Riedel. Now this family is an Austrian family, and they have been making glassware for 11 generations. And they came over in 2009 and worked with our industry to find the ideal shape for some of our varietals, specifically Vignol and Norton. And now this is a little bit smaller glass, which actually helps with our varietal specifically. It's kind of typical for a white wine. It helps keep the wine colder longer. And a lot of Missouri wineries have this for purchase. So if you have a smaller wine glass, I would suggest that for your Vignol.
perfect. Great. Well, now.
But great question. And also, if you have a stemless, I get asked that a lot of times too. Is it okay to use stemless? And the answer is yes. You know, if you were to see me at home, you know, during the evenings having a glass of wine, you're likely going to catch me using a stemless glass. Having a little one roaming around, I need to do all that I can to avoid wine spilling or glassware getting broken. So it is totally acceptable to use a stemless as well.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Annette. I feel like I haven't pulled these glasses out for quite some time.
Well, I'm glad we could have an occasion for that today.
Absolutely, me too.
All right, so if you have your wines, the first S, there's 5 S's in wine tasting, and the first S is for C. Now, we've already established that this is a white wine, but you can actually learn a little bit more about the wine just from looking at it. For example, you can tell a little bit about a wine's age. Wines change a little bit of color as they age. So a white wine is going to gain color or darken. Now, Vignol is a naturally fairly golden wine. And red wines are going to do the opposite. They're actually going to lose a little bit of their vibrancy as they age. Now, the second S is for swirl. And there's not really a wrong way to do this. You can go and give your glass a little swirl. You can rotate your wrist, your whole hand. You can put it on the table in front of you and swirl it. As long as you're not spilling it, you're doing it right. Now, we do this because it helps aerate the wine or open things up, if you will. And that really helps us with our next step. Does anyone have a guess what that might be?
No.
Smell? Yes, absolutely. So go ahead, and you really want to put your nose right down into your glass and get a really good smell of it. I'm going to join you with this. Okay, so are you guys picking anything up when you smell this wine? And there's no wrong answers.
Definitely a fruity, but it's very light. It's
Yes.
not an overwhelming smell at all.
Yep.
Yes, I just thought, man, that smells like light flowers, like a light floral.
Yes,
scent.
absolutely. There are some floral notes. Does anyone get a little bit of peach with this? maybe some pineapple, or melon. You know, a little bit of truth, all white wines have a little bit of a smell of green apple, so you can use that to impress your friends next time you have a white wine with them. Now, smelling the wine actually helps prepare us for the next S, which is my personal favorite, and it's actually sip. So you can go ahead and take a small sip of the wine. Now, when you see a wine professional tasting wine, you often see them really sloshing the wine around in their mouth and making sure that all of that wine touches our palate. And sometimes they even kind of suck air into their mouth to get the wine moving around a bit more. And this really helps make sure that they can pick up on all of the wine's characteristics. Now, did you guys taste anything different than what you smelled?
The taste, the first thing I thought was it tasted just like it smelled.
Yes.
And as it went back on my tongue, I guess I felt like it got a little bit stronger or richer, something, as I tasted it a little bit more. Delicious.
And I think Vignol is very true to its aroma. It tastes very much like it smells. It's really known for its tropical fruit flavors and kind of citrus elements, if you will. It's one of my favorites.
That's what I would say, that I could almost taste the acidic nature of the trop, what I would associate with a pineapple or the fruit.
Yes.
I could taste that.
Absolutely. And to move on, the fifth S is savor. And this is where I like to think of it as an evaluation of the wine. Did you enjoy it? Did it have a nice finish? Or maybe, what would I pair this wine with? So a great pairing for this wine, and really for any pairing, you want the wine to enhance both the food and the overall experience of the wine. And this wine is so versatile and food friendly. You know, we're talking about the holidays. And if you were serving maybe a holiday ham, for example, this would be a great wine to consider pairing with it. It's going to, the fruitiness and the acidity, they're going to be a great combination for that sweet and salty richness of that ham. But there's so many pairings for Vignol for the rest of the year. You know, if you like spicy Asian dishes or even Mexican or a jalapeno popper as an appetizer, we like to say sweet cuts heat, and the sweetness helps kind of put the fire out in those spicy foods. But if you're like me and you have a little bit of a sweet tooth, Vignol can also be great with desserts like cheesecake or creme brulee or really anything with coconut.
That's awesome. So a pretty versatile holiday wine for my table is
Yes.
what I'm seeing here.
Absolutely. It's a crowd pleaser. And I think if you were to show up to any kind of holiday gathering with this, your attendees would be very pleased. And we do have a couple other wines if we want to kind of go through those.
Mm-hmm.
So the second wine that I wanted to share with you today is our Norton. And if you have a little bit larger glass, this is actually the Norton Glass that Riedel created for us. So as you can see, the bowl is much larger. It's really great for Norton. We do a lot of fun side-by-sides where we compare Norton in this glass versus a standard wine glass, and you really can taste the difference in where it places the wine on your palate. I'm gonna go ahead and pour a little bit of that. And this has a beautiful, rich color. Very like dark and inky. Now this Norton is actually from Stone Hill Winery in Hermann, Missouri. And this is another great winery that if you haven't, but you have the opportunity, you really should visit that winery. It was established in 1847. And at the time, prior to Prohibition, it was the second largest winery in the country. And their cellars are just beautiful. If you get the opportunity to take a tour of their cellars, it really showcases our state's winemaking history, and it's just a really unique learning opportunity. Now, this particular vintage, this is a 2017 vintage, and it's pretty famous. It won a Coated Award in 2019 and was identified as the best Norton in the state. So you guys are having some award-winning wines today.
Very special.
Now, like I said, this is the State Grape of Missouri, and you're also going to find this at most Missouri wineries. It is the most widely produced red grape in the state. Now, we don't have to go through all of the 5 S's, but I do suggest giving this one a little bit of swirl, opening that wine up, and then go ahead and give this one a smell. Much different than the first wine we smelled. What are you picking up from this, Heather?
Definitely an oaky kind of smell, stronger than the Vignol.
Absolutely.
A definite, a good scent, but definitely much stronger and richer, I think, than the Vignols.
Absolutely. Macy, did you pick up anything different on this one?
Kind of along the same lines. It's just a very bold, full-bodied smelling wine. It's very different than the first, but both in very positive ways.
You guys are exactly right. Norton is a very bold, different wine than Vignol is. You know, I get a little bit of spice, maybe even some tobacco or dark berry notes. And really, there's no wrong answers, like I said. Everyone is going to pick up on something a little bit different. And that's okay. And that's part of the experience of wine tasting, is that everyone's going to enjoy it a little bit differently, which makes wine really fun to explore.
I almost feel like smelling this, you could be transported back 100 years into a wine cellar. I mean, it feels like rich history, right? Like there's a lot of body to this. This is my favorite Missouri wine by far. So I love the rich nature of a Norton.
Absolutely. Yes, this was one of the grapes that they grew prior to Prohibition. So it does kind of transport you back in time. I'm going to go ahead and try this one with you guys. Now, when we try this wine, go ahead and take a couple sips of it. I like to call it a 3-sip rule. And that first wine is going to kind of introduce the wine to your palate. And it may kind of shock it a little bit, especially compared to the fruity Vignol that we just had. And the second and third sip are going to help your palate adjust so you can really taste all the flavors of the wine. It's a very beautiful wine. And this one is another great wine for the upcoming holidays. You know, it's a full-bodied, dry, rich wine, a little bit of spicy overtone with it, but it's the ideal complement for something like prime rib, or maybe if you're going to have lamb or smoked meats for the holidays. This is going to pair wonderfully with those dishes. You know, if you're looking for a dessert to pair it with, anything like a spice cake or dark chocolates is going to go fabulous. I love a Norton, and I have a lot of fun pairing it, and we always look for kind of unique pairings or just trying it with whatever we might be having. And I recently learned that this goes fabulous with pistachios, and or on the more casual side, it's a great pairing for Doritos.
That is Missouri to its core, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great for any situation. But it's also a great cooking wine. You know, if you're looking for something to kind of enhance your meal, it's a good wine you can cook with, and you can make a wine reduction sauce with that will enhance your beef flavors or whatever you might be serving.
A few years ago for Christmas, I love homemade Christmas gifts, and I love those that use Missouri agricultural products. So I used a Norton and made a grape jelly or jam for Christmas, and it was very rich, very full-bodied, as the wine would be, and really made a fun treat for the holidays.
Fabulous. Well, as you guys know, Christmas is not the only holiday in December. And when it comes to New Year's, there are some other things that we might want to consider serving. And so I hope you guys all have the bottle of sparkling. I'm going to go ahead and open this with you guys. I left the foil cage on just so we didn't have it pop open while we were talking.
That was something I did not know.
Now, when you're opening a sparkling, so I'm going to use a towel, and you're going to kind of hold that cork with the towel, and you want to actually twist the bottle, not the cork, so it kind of loosens up. Not usually doing this in front of a computer, so I don't want to try a different towel.
I will say I opened mine.
My face as I wait.
I find that highly intimidating, and I definitely didn't want that documented.
You don't want to face it at your face, or point it at your face. And they can be a little bit of take a little bit of work, but I promise it's worth the wait.
It's definitely a sound that brings just a sense of celebration, even if you're sitting in your dining room by yourself, like I am. It's a fun sound. I like it.
Absolutely. That signature sound of corks popping always makes me excited and kind of signals a celebration, if you will.
There's always something to celebrate.
I promise this will open. Woo! There we are. Okay, now when we're pouring, I am going to use a flute. You don't have to use a flute. Some people like more of a tulip-shaped glass that allows more aromas, but we do use a flute just so it saves some of those fabulous bubbles that we all look forward to with a sparkling wine. So I always pour it about a third full, just so that the bubbles don't overwhelm or we don't spill anything. And then we can kind of top it off from there. Now I should mention, this is a Brut from Les Bourgeois Vineyards, which is just outside Columbia. They have one of the best riverfront views for their A-frame. So I highly suggest visiting there if you have not. Now, but there are several Missouri wineries that are producing this classic, sparkling, celebratory beverage. So there are several opportunities you can enjoy this. Now I am going to take a drink of water to kind of cleanse my palate between the Norton and the sparkling. Now this is made with Vignol Blanc grapes, which is another one of the French-American hybrids. And it is made in the traditional method, the same method that they make champagne in France. And Brut, that is a French word for dry. So it's actually describing the style of the wine rather than the varietal like the others that we tried today. And the sweetness scales of sparkling can kind of be difficult to decipher. So we do have a graphic that we talk about, and the scale is kind of a sliding scale. So we start with Brut or extra Brut on the dry end, move to extra dry, dry, and then demi-sec being on the other end of the scale, being a sweeter option for a sparkling. So I'm gonna go ahead and try this with you guys. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. How about cheers to a 2021, taking us out of 2020.
I like that, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can see it on camera, but those fabulous bubbles just rising up is one of the great elements from obviously a sparkling wine or some bubbly. Now several wineries also do make a sparkling rosé, which is just delightful. And you can enjoy this wine by itself, just like this for a celebration. And you don't have to have a celebration open sparkling. You can drink it on a Wednesday afternoon or evening. You don't have to have a celebration. But you can add some things to kind of take it up a notch. You can obviously add orange juice or even a cranberry juice for the holidays. We actually just tested a recipe earlier this week that we'll be posting closer to the new year, where we use some raspberry puree to make a festive holiday drink. But we make a lot of really fun beverages with cocktails, and we have a lot of those on Pinterest or on our social media, so you can check them out there. You can drink sparkling wine on its own, or you can pair it with great things like seafood, oysters, lobster, or even common items like fried chicken or popcorn make really fun pairings for a sparkling wine.
Mixing it with the cranberry juice, or we call them poinsettias, is kind of a tradition at our house. It's one of our favorites.
Yeah, it's really fun. I'm going to try something new this year. I saw it online that people were using orange sherbet and sparkling to make a mimosa, so we're going to try that with our family this Christmas.
Sounds delicious.
Yes, it sounds delightful. This just has an aroma and a taste that just makes me think festive.
It does. It kind of just makes you want to celebrate and, enjoy the moment.
Absolutely.
So, Annette, I love all of these wines, but I've always considered myself a bit of an enthusiast in that my enthusiasm outweighs my knowledge. So whenever I decide to serve wine, I have a lot of questions. And we reached out to some of our followers and our MFC membership for their questions as well. So we'd like to shoot some of those at you now, if we could.
By all means, yes.
The first one is one of the ones that I struggle with the most is how do you buy for a crowd? Is there a rule of thumb for how much per guest?
Great question. So one thing that I always like to think about is obviously how many people are going to be there. And when you think about a bottle of wine and a serving size, so a traditional serving of wine is really only about 4 to 5 ounces. So in a standard 750 milliliter bottle, there should be about 5 glasses of wine or servings within a bottle. So then you can do some simple math, factor in the number of guests, the length of time of the event, but also take into consideration, are there other beverages that will be served during the evening? Are there other options? But if you do happen to have some leftover wine, we have some great tips on our social media that you can put that to use.
Kind of on that same train of thought, I have a question as far as flavor or type of wine. If I'm a firm believer, and just in my personal life, I try not to show up anywhere empty-handed, and wine, I think, is the perfect go-to. Nobody is upset when you show up with a bottle of wine. But how do you buy a wine for someone you don't know the preferences of? Is there a fan favorite? Is there a safe bet? What do you recommend?
Well, I always bring a Vignol because when I take a Vignol somewhere, it tends to be, like I said, a crowd pleaser. There's people that like drier wines. If I bring a dry style Vignol, they kind of, really enjoy that. But it has so many fruity elements, and people often interpret fruitiness for sweetness, that it can help please those people that like a sweeter wine as well.
Great, thank you. I will say I normally lean towards sweet or semi-sweet, and I loved the dry Vignol we tried today. So,
great.
Yes. And on the red side, do you have a recommendation for a varietal? I often have friends, though my favorite wine is a Norton, that often say, I really lean towards the sweet. Is there somewhere in the middle there in Missouri wines that's a crowd pleaser?
Yeah, there's a couple different options you could consider. So you could always look at a rosé. We do have a Catawba, or they're actually making rosés out of Norton, or a grape called Chambourcin, which is another French hybrid that we talked about. And Chambourcin, I kind of consider it the underdog red, or a great entry-level red. People overlook it often at wineries because they're so proud of the state grape in their Nortons. But Chambourcin is it's more of a medium-bodied dry red, but it can be done in different styles too. You can do a Chambourcin rosé that might be great for those people.
Thank you.
So you gave us a little bit of direction before we met today, but what about chilling your wine? What kind needs to be cold? What doesn't?
Great question. So, and we get asked that all the time. Which ones do you chill? What temperature is the best? And honestly, it can be kind of subjective to the person. So I do encourage people to try their wines at various temperatures and see what they like best. But an easy guideline to help folks or to remember is called 3-2-1. And you're going to chill your sparkling in the fridge for 3 hours, your whites and rosés for 2 hours, and your reds just for an hour. You want your sparkling to reach about 45 degrees, your whites and rosés about 55. And actually, if you serve a white too cold, it can actually mask or hide some of those flavors. And people are actually kind of surprised when I say you can put your red in the fridge for just an hour. What we're trying to reach there is a temperature of 65 degrees. And they assume that, room temperature is ideal, and it might be for you. But what we're trying to achieve with that is actually cellar temperature. And most people keep their homes a little bit warmer than what we do in the wine cellars. But like I said, you can try your wines at various temperatures and really see what you like best. And some wines are even flexible. They can be served a little bit warmer or a little bit chilled, or even as a mulled wine warmed up.
I have to say that tip about the red, I have always served my red at room temperature, but I put mine in the fridge for an hour, and it just cut back a little bit on that first drink where it was, where it kind of almost hits you a little bit. It just felt, it was great. And that's a tip that I'm definitely going to use.
Excellent. Well, glad we can help with that. Another tip along with chilling wines, people ask about where do I store my wine? And I want to just point out, don't store your wine for a long period of time in the refrigerator. That can actually dry out the cork a little bit, which can lead to oxidation, a lot of things that we want to avoid with wine. But it's actually best to store an unopened wine on its side. Keeps the wine against that cork and keeps that hydrated. And you want to keep it in a cool, dark place and then chill just before you're going to serve.
That's a great suggestion that I had also forgotten. So these unopened bottles of wine, say that I don't get through these this afternoon.
Yeah.
What's the best way to store even short term between servings?
Excellent question. Yeah. A lot of times you may not finish a bottle during the evening, or maybe you guys call it a night with your friends after the second bottle and you're like, oh, can I keep this a little bit longer? And the answer is yes. Your red wines are going to stay good for about 5 to 7 days. And your white should still be good for about another 3 to 4. Now, there are some fancy wine pumps that like a little cork stopper that you can pump the air out. And I do recommend those. They can extend the life of your wine by a few days. Now, once you have your bottle open, I do recommend putting it in the fridge upright. 1, for spillage, and 2, it reduces that surface area with air contact on the wine. So it's going to keep it fresher and less oxidized, if you will. Great question.
Do you find, Annette, I would just be curious, I always think of Missouri as a pretty diverse state, from different areas of the state to our agriculture. Does the taste vary by areas of the state, you think? Or is that just kind of all over the place?
Yeah, you hit on a great point. So they call it terroir, and that's part of the wine region where the grapes are grown, having an impact on the flavors. And there is specific terroir across the state. And I do see that, a winemaker or a vineyard can produce the same grape, Norton, for example, in 2 different regions, and it can taste completely different. And we actually have some very diverse wine regions across the state. We call them AVAs, or American Viticultural Areas, and we actually have the first federally recognized area in Augusta, so it's a little point of pride for us. But there's 5 federal or national wine regions in Missouri, and the wines do taste different depending on where the grapes are grown, what the climate was like there, rainfall, soil types. All different things really do impact the flavors of the grape and therefore the taste of the wine.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
So Annette, for all of our listeners who are joining us, is there still a Missouri wine trail? And how can we keep track of the explorations as we go and enjoy those different AVAs and the different wines across the state?
Yeah, great question. We actually have 11 wine trails across the state of Missouri. So no matter where you live in the state, you're probably not too far from a collection of wineries that you can explore. And we have a great place where you can keep up with the events, with the trails, and just festivals in a normal year. But you can check out our website, missouriwine.org, and we have a calendar there that lists all kinds of great opportunities. You can also follow us on social media. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest for fun ideas, recipes, pairings, and sometimes even some DIY craft to use all those leftover corks.
That's a ton of fun. Well, I encourage everybody to check that out. The Wine and Grape program also has a regular newsletter that has those fun tips and upcoming activities. And so I like that push to me in case I've forgotten to stay up to date. And so that's a great one too that I'm sure you can sign up on your website.
Yes, you can.
Okay. Well, I have so enjoyed having you today, and to each of our co-hosts, to Heather and to Macy Hurst, we so appreciate. This has been a fun dive into Missouri wines and the $3 billion industry that is a powerhouse of Missouri ag. So we thank you so much. Thanks for all the promotion that you do. And our best to our listeners, and please reach out. There's avenues through social media if you have more questions, and please reach out and continue the conversation. That's always our goal at Missouri Farmers Care. So thanks to each of you, and tune in again next week when Carrie Asbury with Missouri Farmers Care is going to host a holiday feast of Missouri Beef Edition. So a great opportunity to brush up on your pairing with maybe your Norton or other favorite Missouri wine. And until then, our best to you.